Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast on the Pigskin Podcast Network. I'm Chase Goodbread, the sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News. Travis Reier, senior analyst at BamaOnline.com, with you as well. The Talkin Tide podcast available to you wherever you like to get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Facebook, and YouTube Live, and both of those online locales. The Talkin Tide podcast sponsored by Peterbrook Chocolatier and DraftKings. We look ahead with our Sugar Bowl preview in this episode, and as well, we'll talk a little bit about the freshly finished SEC opener for the Alabama basketball team. But Travis, first, taking a look at this Alabama-Kansas State Sugar Bowl matchup. I'm coming to you live from the upper reaches of the Sheridan on Canal Street. Been here a couple of days with the rest of the T-News crew. The team is staying right across the street, right across Canal at that big Marriott. And it's an interesting day, Travis, with Bill O'Brien, by the way, taking his seat at the podium for the first time since August. And, of course, one of the very first questions was about his future. He swatted it away like a fly, pretty much, like you pretty much expect. But Bill O'Brien's future certainly among the storylines here as we look ahead to this game.
No doubt about it. Been rumbled about for a while. There have been reports of late linking Bill O'Brien with the potential return to the New England Patriots and working with Bill Belichick. Mac Jones probably be okay with that at this point, given that situation throughout the 2022 season for the Pats. But I think once we get through this game, obviously Charles Kelly is going to be moving on to the CU Buffaloes, working for Coach Prime out there in the Pac-12. But it'll be interesting. One of the lingering storylines will be this coaching staff and exactly how much movement we'll see.
Nuts and bolts football, Travis. A couple of practice viewings down here in the Caesars Superdome. Quite a handful of early enrollers around to help out with practice. But this matchup with Kansas State, I think, is an interesting one. And defensively for Alabama, certainly getting their arms around Deuce Vaughn is going to be a big part of this. They can throw the ball too, with Will Howard or whoever they've got in there at quarterback. But Vaughn's the key to it.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. This is a guy, when you look at him, 5'7", about 180 pounds, Chase, and you think just perimeter oriented, and he's very effective out there on the outside zone runs and working the edges. And we know Alabama struggled with that mightily its last time out against Auburn on the defensive side. But this is a guy that can hurt you. He's a determined runner. He can also flex out into the slot. And when they do that with him, it's not just for grins. This is a guy that they'll dial up on some legitimate receiver routes. So you can't just view him as window dressing when he's not lined up in the backfield. Just a really good all-around football player, a lot of fun to watch. And I think you also have to consider the possibility of Adrian Martinez being back in this mix. Although Will Howard is expected to play the majority of the game behind center for K-State, if you're the Wildcats and that offensive brain trust, Chase, and you know the kind of issues that a mobile, athletic quarterback can give a defense like Alabama's, I would think we see Martinez in the game as well. So it's not a situation where with Howard in there, Alabama can focus entirely on just the running back position, because K-State with Martinez, depending on his availability, that could be a part of the game plan that Alabama has to consider. And then jet sweeps, man, are a big part of what K-State does on the ground. Malik Knowles, the wide receiver, but he's been really effective on those too.
And one common thread, I think, among several of the things you just touched on is that this is a big game for Brian Branch at the star spot for Alabama. You would assume that there at least be a few matchups of Vaughn in the slot and Branch. And like you said, Vaughn can test Branch even at his size. With some route running, a lot of eyes scouting wise on Branch as well. We'll be watching that matchup for sure. But the star usually ends up playing somewhat of a significant role in stopping quarterback runs as well. And like you said, that's something that can hurt Alabama here and there. Hendon Hooker gave Alabama a few problems with his feet, not a ton. Jaden Daniels certainly was more of a problem on the ground against the Crimson Tide defense. But Brian Branch is going to play a big role in this one.
How about somebody on the perimeter, whether it's a corner, whether it's Brian Branch, whether it's an outside linebacker or defensive end? How about somebody set an edge in this game? Because there's nothing that K-State saw in that performance against Auburn that is going to discourage it from getting away from a lot of its bread and butter,
right?
Which is outside zone, jet sweeps. K-State's going to look to challenge that from the get-go on Saturday morning. So Alabama better show up, even with Will Anderson playing in the game, Dallas Turner around. I'll be interested to see if Alabama goes with more big nickel against this K-State rushing attack, especially on early downs. Maybe they go with a true defensive end opposite Will Anderson. K-State, there's a silver lining for Alabama. K-State, from what I've seen, not a big tempo team. So Alabama should be able to substitute the personnel that it wants on the field rather freely. So whether it's first down, whether it's the cheetah package, which hasn't exactly lit it up like some of us anticipated it might, depending on down and distance, Alabama should be able to get the people it wants on the field. In other words, it shouldn't have many excuses on Saturday.
How about the offensive side of the ball? Let's touch on that a little bit, Travis, for Alabama going against this Kansas State defense. As we know, Javian Cohen has moved on as a transfer portal guy, so Tyler Booker is going to command a starting role right out of the gate. That'll be certainly something interesting to watch. You would expect Alabama's running backs to have plenty of spring in their steps with the time off that they've had. I think the wide receiver rotation will be pretty interesting as well. No JoJo Earl, no Trayshawn Holden. I think, as you noted a podcast or two ago, Holden's snaps had already been diminished toward the end of the season. But nevertheless, the guard spot and how they bring in receivers, the fourth receiver, the fifth receiver, et cetera, that'll be something to watch.
It will, and there's been pretty much a youth movement, although of the departures that Alabama has had via the transfer portal, only Holden was the guy with more than 2 years in the program. The other three guys had 1 year or 2 years. It's just, with the freedom of movement now for transfers, it's amazing how quick guys are getting on with things from that perspective. But yeah, I mean, whether it's Isaiah Bond, whether it's Kobe Prentice, Kendrick Law's a guy we've seen more of later in the season. I think Law and Bond had a combined 6 catches against Auburn the last time we saw this Alabama offense. So I would expect to see those guys involved in this one. But it starts still with Ja'Cory Brooks, who has really come on over the second half of the season. Jermaine Burton has shown some really positive signs in the last 2 or 3 games. I would guess it might be Bond that gets the start in the slot, although we could see Alabama with more of the 2-back stuff, with Jahmyr Gibbs and Jace McClellan in the backfield together. And so, there are some things to sort out there from the receiving corps perspective. These guys need to make this K-State secondary pay. K-State's down a couple of starting safeties. They've got a 6'4" corner that's an impressive guy in Julius Brents. They've got another corner that has played a lot of football for K-State throughout the years. So they use this 3-3-5 defense, Chase. And so they're used to playing with nickel on the field, which makes me wonder if Alabama might not go again with more 2-backs or even more 2 tight ends and look to get downhill in the run game early.
Yeah, and as you noted, if they're short at the safety spot, you wonder how Alabama tries to exploit that. You really don't see Alabama run a lot of true post routes, but they do run the deep cross, right? Maybe Cameron Latou is a little bit more active in this game if they're trying to exploit the safety position as well. So in the passing game for Bryce Young, if they want to check under the hood, as you like to say, on the safety replacements, that's a couple ways they could do it.
Yeah, it is. And TCU had some opportunities in the middle of the field and kind of working the split safeties right in the middle of the field that Max Duggan wasn't able to hit on, actually. So we'll see how that goes. I will say this. I don't think K-State is going to have any problem manning up Alabama's wide receivers on the outside, simply because I think they feel like they can do it. Both of their starting corners have 26 career starts to their credit. So, these are corners with some serious miles that they put in there for K-State. So, and look, it's an Alabama receiving corps that at times has had trouble getting separation. And Brooks has done some nice things again over the second half of the season. Burton has come on of late. But this isn't Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs and Devontae Smith that we're talking about. So as crazy as this might sound with Bryce Young at the quarterback position, I think first and foremost, K-State's going to say, you're not just going to line up and beat us with Jahmyr Gibbs and Jason McClellan running the football. We're going to make you do it with, hopefully, from their perspective, Bryce Young throwing it 40, 45 plus times.
Yeah, Alabama with the struggles at wide receiver, the drops they've been through this season as well. That's been a problem at times for sure, and just getting open has been that struggle. And when I got the mic with O'Brien this afternoon, I asked him if he either misinterpreted my question or he got my question and just wanted to answer a different question. Sometimes that happens too, Travis. But I asked him if he felt like, if the offense had relied too heavily on Young's ability to scramble. And what I meant was scramble and throw, right? Extend pass plays and play the scramble drill after you've broken off the play design. And O'Brien answered as if I was asking about Young's ability to take off and pick up rushing yards, which of course he doesn't like to do. I guess that might have been a clever dodge, Travis.
Well, I will say this on a positive note for this Alabama offense. I think we saw against Auburn more of what it's capable of doing. Jahmyr Gibbs certainly looked healthier and rejuvenated, right, in that game. Some of the same for Jace McClellan. Bryce, I thought, looked much more like the Bryce we saw pre-shoulder injury against Arkansas. So when you factor in the time off they've had between games, just from an energy, juice, health perspective, this should be as good as Alabama's been since the early stages of the season. So, I think K-State, again, matches up pretty well. They've got an elite edge pass rusher. So if they are able to make Alabama become more one-dimensional, I think they're going to like their chances of being able to get after Bryce pretty good. He's a guy that can extend plays, but K-State does a nice job with their twists and their games inside. And while they don't have 4 and 5 stars throughout their front seven, they have veteran guys that have time in that system, and they're willing to help one another make plays. They don't have hero guys. When I watch K-State, I don't see a lot of hero ball. I see a lot of continuity and a lot of cohesion that has gone a long way in helping them win 10 games this season.
Probably ought to touch briefly too, Travis, on the situation at that will linebacker spot for Alabama in this one. Jalen Moody in a sling at practice at the Caesar Superdome. Obviously, he's presumably out. You don't get out of a sling in a couple of days usually to jump on the field. Deontay Lawson also hampered. So, you wonder, and Jihad Campbell's been seeing some action and brag. You wonder what that'll look like. And just as Alabama may try to exploit the safety situation with Kansas State's defense, might Kansas State's offense try to test what Alabama brings at that position?
Yeah, we saw Sean Murphy for a minute against Auburn when Henry To'oTo'o went out with the busted bridge of his nose. It was a cameo, but based on the practice reports from you and others, it does sound like Alabama, who knows, could be down to its fourth inside linebacker in this game. If Moody can't go, if Lawson is either out or limited, that would be a heck of a situation for Jihad Campbell or anyone else to step into, because you're talking about dealing with primarily guys like Deuce Vaughn in the run game. And also, K-State gives you a lot of pre-snap eye candy and post-snap stuff. They'll run that jet sweep action, get you looking at that, and then counter the other way with Deuce Vaughn. And Malik Knowles is such an explosive player when he's involved in the jet sweep game. You have to respect it. So you kind of get outflanked or outnumbered one way or the other. So that could be a tough spot for an inexperienced inside linebacker. It's been tough enough for Alabama's experienced guys to deal with at times this season. So definitely something to keep an eye on when this game gets going on Saturday.
What about that 6.5 point number from the Vegas man in this one, Travis? It was a 3-point spread before Young and Anderson made their decisions to go ahead and play. I thought it would get up over a touchdown once those announcements were made, but I guess those two were worth 3.5 according to the men in Vegas.
Yeah, I think that there's still some trust issues, not only with this team in relation to some previous Sugar Bowl failures that it's had in sort of college football playoff settings or BCS settings down in New Orleans, but just the way that it hasn't achieved to expectations throughout the season. Yeah, we talk about the two losses, the close losses to top 10 teams on the road, but really throughout the season, this team has never reached its full potential. Now that'll change on Saturday, and maybe that energy that we felt from those decisions by Bryce Young and Will Anderson to play will have traveled down to New Orleans and carry over into the game, and it'll be more like what we've seen from Alabama and Orlando in this type of situation than maybe New Orleans in the past. But I also don't want to discount, again, a very veteran, a very hungry, a very capable Kansas State team. And again, a team that isn't reliant upon marquee players to carry it. It is very much a team effort with K-State. It's really impressive to watch. And so I don't have a lot of trust in Alabama laying the 6.5, whatever it is. I think I'm going into this one expecting a 4-quarter game that maybe it comes down to the best player on the field or best players on the field ultimately making the difference in. But I don't know about you. I just have trust issues with this Alabama team. It really doesn't have anything to do with the Sugar Bowls of the past or anything like that. I don't really trust this team.
How can you when they played so many games that came down to the bitter end? I think they had 4 games that come down to the last play. Had another, Ole Miss came down to the last drive. That
Texas
very nearly
A&M,
came down to the last play.
Yeah.
A&M, LSU,
Texas.
Tennessee, Texas. So yeah, 6.5 is uncomfortable for me as well. I do expect Alabama to win the game. I think it will be a tight one. All right, here on the Talkin Tide podcast on the Pigskin Podcast Network, the Twitter feed, Talkin_Tide. We're going to thank a couple sponsors really quickly. We're going to start by telling you about the corporate sponsor. That would be DraftKings. If you're looking to put some money down on the NFL, the go-to is the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Travis, our Jacksonville Jaguars in the throes of an AFC South championship hunt, big game with the Titans. That's going to determine that one at the end of the season. So a lot of fun, a lot of wagering to get into. Right now, customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. Also, check out those same game parlays and combine multiple bets as well, player props, point totals, and more. Download that DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code TPPN. Place a $5 bet on any NFL team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do, only at the DraftKings Sportsbook with promo code TPPN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply.
Going to tell you about Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. What a tremendous run through the holiday season for Peterbrook Chocolatier. On behalf of Heather and the rest of her staff there at Peterbrook, a big thank you for every one of you who made that possible. It doesn't end with Christmas, though. You got the New Year's holiday coming up. I mean, if you're going to watch all this football between college bowl games, the college football playoff, NFL action, you got to have your treat. You got to have your treat sort of reservoir there nearby. And you can get that handled at Peterbrook Chocolatier, 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hill section of Tuscaloosa.
All right, Talkin Tide podcast is going to move on now, talk a little bit about Alabama basketball's SEC opener. It was on the road. It was Tuesday night, and they end up taking care of business, Travis, against the Mississippi State Bulldogs in Starkville, 78-67, the final score. Definitely not a game of offensive flair early, Travis. 10 minutes into this game, Alabama only had 8 points, But defensively, Alabama pretty much matched Mississippi State stop for stop early in the game. Could have been way down. Instead, they got halfway through the first half. It was 10-8 Mississippi State, and then Mark Sears kind of shook them loose a little bit with some scoring in the first half, and then of course Brandon Miller ended up hitting some threes in the second half that were a real dagger in this one.
They were. And look, Mississippi State came into the game giving up 52.6 points per game, I believe, third best in all of Division I college basketball when you talk about points allowed per game. So Mississippi State in the first half got the rock fight that it desired, as you said, certainly for the first 10 minutes or so. You get to the break, Alabama has a 34-30 lead, and State has hit 7 threes in the first half. And this is not a great or even a team that really wants to shoot a lot of threes in Mississippi State. But to be in that situation and still be up 4 after DJ Jeffries hit a prayer right there at the buzzer to send you to the half, still felt pretty good for Alabama. Alabama continued to push the ball in transition. You said it, Mark Sears, very efficient, 20 points on just 11 shots. He went 6 of 6 from the free throw line. Brandon Miller, absolutely, with some big daggers there in the second half. Tulu Smith for State was going to be the key for the Bulldogs. They run this offense now under new coach Chris Jans through the block. So Tulu Smith came in averaging around 16 and 9 a game. He finishes with 5 points, 6 rebounds in 23 minutes of action. 3 of 15 from the free throw line for Tulu Smith. So State ends up shooting twice as many free throws as Alabama. State shot 36 free throws in the game. Alabama shot 18. State made only 4 more free throws than Alabama in the game, with 18 compared to 14 for Alabama. So Hackatulu, I guess you could call it. And that's one thing this Alabama team has this year, Chase, between Clowney, who went for 12 and 8, Nick Pringle off the bench was tremendous, giving them some valuable minutes with 10 and 4, whether it's Noah Gurley, whether it's Charles Bediako. They've got about 20 fouls to give to a guy like Tulu Smith. And Tulu came in shooting 60% from the line. I got a feeling Alabama may have known that before it made the trip to Starkville.
You know, a ton of fouls for Alabama in both halves. They had Mississippi State in the bonus pretty quick on both ends. And, you know, I think if this game taught us anything, Travis, it's that if Brandon Miller's not in foul trouble, then the whole team's not in foul trouble, because he's the one guy that you don't want in foul trouble at all ever. But the point is, you can name anybody else on the roster. If they get in foul trouble, Oates can find a patch because they're deep enough, I think, to survive multiple guys in foul trouble and just feed that bench minutes and let them do their thing.
Yeah, Nate rolled with Brandon with 2 there in the first half, and Miller picked up his third. So that was a little dicey there. But he managed to play through it there in the second half with 11 points with those 3 big threes after the break. And so they weathered it. And it was a sold out crowd at the Hump. So this is a top 25 team, at least according to the AP rankings. I think they're more top 40-ish in the other metrics that really matter when you talk about Mississippi State. But to go on the road in your SEC opener and go ahead and get a win, you saw really throughout the night, it was not easy within the league. Florida, Auburn, close game. Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Oxford, close game. Kentucky goes to Missouri and gets shelled in its SEC opener. So I think the early games gave us a little bit more of an appreciation for going to a place like State and getting the job done.
You can also kind of tell, Travis, I think at least at this point in the season, and maybe when we get to March, it's a different scenario. But right now, at the point spot, the trust is in Sears and Bradley,
yes,
and not so much in Quinterly. I mean, he had 11
and
minutes.
It should be.
Yeah, his minutes have been down lately. Really has struggled with turnovers. Had 4 turnovers in 11 minutes against Mississippi State, and 6 points total. But the plus minus was 11, Travis. I think to me that's kind of played a role in this as well. And the guy's a phenomenal talent. There's no doubt about it. But Bradley is coming into his own in a couple ways. Really nice heady play for him, getting the timeout on the loose ball where he was sliding across the floor
and he got on the floor. Up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's half of that or more.
I mean that's. I refer to him as an old soul when it comes to basketball, sort of instincts, and he turns it over. I'm not going to say he didn't. He turned it over 4 times. He also had 7 assists in the game. But you said it, plus minus. Jaden Bradley was plus 12 in 25 minutes. Sears was plus 17 in 36 minutes with just 1 turnover in 36 minutes of action for Mark Sears. And then you get to Javon. He plays 11 minutes. He's a minus 11 in plus minus. The only player for Alabama that wasn't on the plus side of plus minus in the basketball game was Javon Quinterly, and he was minus 11. So, it's not just having to justify minutes to the player. In some situations, you're also having to justify it to the rest of the team. If I keep putting a guy out there, and I keep putting him out there for extended minutes, I kind of got to answer to the rest of the team, and especially guys who aren't getting those kind of minutes or those kind of opportunities.
Yeah, especially at 9, 10, and 11, where you got good basketball players who aren't getting much of anything.
And now Dom Welch is available. We saw him in the game on Wednesday night. Didn't make a shot. He was 0 for 2 from 3. He had a couple of rebounds, but you saw some of the defensive ability he brings to the fore, and he will make shots in time. And so, you got some mouths to feed. And so it's going to be interesting. I think I call it the reality of the rotation. And this is about the time of the year that it starts to take hold. And so we'll see. I think for coaches like Nate Oates, it's the most challenging aspect of the job, especially when you've got a talented roster like this. How do you justify minutes, and how do you maintain morale in your locker room and on your bench, and just from the team dynamic in general?
Yeah, I touched on that with Oates maybe a week to 10 days ago. I threw a question at him right along those lines, basically balancing the goal of finding your best 5 versus, getting a deep bench on the floor to keep them engaged. And his answer I thought was pretty interesting. He said, look, I'll give anybody minutes if they earn it based on practice, but I'm also not going to be afraid with a quick hook. And if you put somebody out there who gets a little bug-eyed, then he's going to call that not ready.
Well, and this is a Mississippi State team that loves to get up into you, and they will push you out beyond the 3-point line in terms of your offense.
Yeah.
And boy, you got to take care of the basketball against these guys. And I think once Quinterly got to about that third or fourth turnover, he pretty much made the decision for Nate, right? I mean, you said it. You got Sears that you're feeling better and better about. You got Bradley likewise. That doesn't mean there's still not a spot or a role for a guy like Javon Quinterly. He's too talented. But it starts with taking care of the basketball. And if you're not doing that on a consistent basis, this team has other guys that can do it.
Yeah. That'll probably wrap it up here for this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast. Travis, before we go, we've got a quick question from our guy, Paul Malone. He wants a stand-up from you.
I don't know if I'll do a stand-up. Muscle, shoals, sound, Paul.
He predicted it. So there you go. So
that's right.
Absolutely.
Sheffield,
great
Alabama. That's right.
You and I have both done the music studio tours there, I believe. Me only once, you perhaps more than once.
Yeah. Got to do it, man. If you're ever in the Shoals, all of that's great. I mean, it's Fame, Muscle Shoals sound. It's outstanding.
All right, that's going to do it for the Talkin Tide podcast. Be sure to join Travis and I when we reconvene. I guess that'll be for a regular Sunday night or recapping the Crimson Tide's Sugar Bowl matchup against Kansas State, 11 a.m. Central Time on Saturday. And with that, we'll let you go. We'll talk to you next time right here on Talkin Tide.